Welcome, everybody. I'm Tom Daccord. I am the co-founder and the CEO of EdTechTeacher, and I'm excited to introduce a special guest, Reshan Richards. And Reshan is going to be talking about his session at the Innovation Connection. That's a one-day event, November the 1st at Bentley University in Boston, where Carl Hooker, very popular and very well-known education technology speaker, will kick off our day with the keynote. And then we're going to have a series of concurrent sessions featuring Reshan and others. So first of all, Dr. Richards is director of the New Canaan County School. He is in Connecticut. He's also the co-founder of the amazing ExplainEverything app. And that app can do just about anything. It is pretty amazing. He's also an adjunct professor. He teaches at Teachers College at Columbia University and has written some books as well. I don't know how you have the time, Reshan, but has written Blending Leadership, 6 Simple Beliefs for Leading Online and Off, and Make Yourself Clear, How to Use the Teaching Mindset to Listen, Understand, Explain Everything, and Be Understood. And having read one of those books, I can attest to how thoughtful you are and how creative you are. And hey, we go back now, what is it, 7 years when we first met? That was at the iPad Summit, I think, right? Back in 2013.
It was, yes.
Yeah, and I was just, so impressed, specifically the ExplainEverything app and the creativity and all the flexibility with that app. But then, listening to you speak in various sessions, how thoughtful you are about pedagogies and very purposeful instructional approaches. And so it's just a pleasure to have this opportunity to chat with you again. And thank you for this. And of course, thank you for coming to the Innovation Connection. We'll get rolling on your session, combating video conference fatigue using a digital whiteboard. So what are the sort of major themes that you'll be addressing in that session?
So I first want to draw attention to research, which is ongoing as folks who started at Stanford, and I think they've now spread into a few other organizations who are looking into this, but the real impact on the human condition of doing way more video calls, video conference mediated conversation, both professionally and even in personal lives, and just what's going on there, really like looking at it from a phenomenon. As a phenomenon. The academic word for phenomenological studies. There you go. It's too many syllables, but you get what I mean. And so this is, so important, just I think in general, human research, but certainly in schools where it's so important to really understand what is happening before kind of jumping to figuring out what solutions might be. So I'm grateful that this particular body of research that's been looking at video conference fatigue has been coming out, because I think there's both near-term and long-term implications for what school leaders do, teachers do, and then also folks who make any kind of digitally mediated solutions are doing. What was really interesting and I think practical about this research is that they presented it in a very accessible way, kind of surfacing 4 key initial findings that they found in the body of research. And I can list them off, and then I'll kind of get into what I'm hoping to share at the event in November. So those 4 things are, one, that in video conferences, I guess in general, with human beings, excessive eye contact is exhausting. So if you try to imagine, even in an in-person setting, that, you have permission to break eye gaze and contact, right? And, you kind of come in and out, and you can find ways to kind of recenter and recalibrate with the person you're speaking to, but you're not necessarily just always fixated there. But somehow video conference platforms might almost dictate that you feel like you have to be looking right at your fellow participants. Otherwise, maybe it'll be inferred that you're kind of disconnecting or disengaging because you're not sharing all of the other contextual elements that you might in an in-person setting. So that's number one. And that immediately resonated with me. It's that feels true.
Right, it does.
So that, and then another one, which the second finding was that seeing yourself constantly is also exhausting. So I don't know if you have this setting on. I know I do, and it's not out of vanity, but that when we're in a video conference, in addition to seeing the participants, you've also got this mirror that you're also seeing yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's a very strange thing, because it's not like when you're in a dialogue in a meeting room with somebody or with a group of people that you're speaking to everyone. And by the way, you keep a mirror of yourself right next to you to constantly check in on. And so that's an interesting kind of fatigue driving element. Another one which we can all feel, I mean, here you and I are both seated, that when we're in video conferences, any kind of mobility gets taken away, right? That we become tethered to the place of where the dialogue is happening, which is also, especially when you think about classroom settings, it's unnatural, right? To feel so tethered and locked in, both teacher and students in that space. And then finally, this was more of a general finding, that just in general, that, you know, your cognitive load, your cognitive exhaustion is much higher. They measured this somehow when you're in a video conference session, just because there's so much you're navigating, one context that's happening within the video conference, plus everything that's also in your physical surroundings. So this is what the study was exploring, and I thought it was really interesting how they surfaced these points, and then how they kind of laid them out in those 4 points.
So when you're working now with educators, how are you trying to instruct them, or how are you trying to maybe perhaps best put strategize with them to overcoming some of these challenges and some of the barriers to a more interpersonal connection?
Oh, I think the first thing is just to help folks be just more aware and more like start to pick up on the things that, like, if you're feeling a sense of exhaustion or feeling disconnected or feeling like you've had enough, like pay attention, like which of these things are feeling like it's driving the exhaustion. Is it that feeling of being tethered, or is it that you've seen enough of yourself, or that there's just been constant video mediated eye contact? And I think, you know, that's part one. And then part two is then trying to figure out, like, who's in a position of enough power to give permission to kind of mitigate those things, right? So, like, how is it okay maybe to do some of the things which they've suggested, some of which only you feel as because within your own computer, but some which have to do with the setting. So for example, right, if I decided, Tom, I'm feeling kind of tired of having excessive eye contact with you, in this setting, do I have permission to turn my camera off? Right. And how is that going to change the dynamic of our work together? Right. But that gets set by the rapport, the relationship between whoever's in that conversation, or in the case of a teacher and students, like, how do you make that okay, that folks have permission to kind of take a camera break as a form of, like, just trying to take a break or feel a little bit better. You know, there are some other things. So with the eye contact, a lot of that has to do with even just this display or video size, right? So I don't know if when you're in a video conference like now, do you have everything in full screen, or do you have it as a minimized window? Because maybe even just by minimizing the window and not being in full screen mode, that might lessen some of that feeling of that excessive eye contact. So that is one of the suggestions that came out of that research to kind of address the excessive eye contact, is like, hey, maybe try to no longer be in full screen mode, right? Another choice is, at least, you know, we're in Zoom right now, and I think a lot of the other conference providers have it, that I think if you mouse over your own thumbnail, you can hide self view. So this means that I'm hiding it from myself here, but you still see me, but I no longer have to see myself. And it's a small thing, but all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, now I just feel like I'm looking at you. I'm not looking at you and me at the same time. I'm not watching you and watching myself talk to you digitally, which is just a strange feeling when you really step back and think about it. Oh, you're on mute, Tom.
Yeah, sorry. I feel for those teachers who are in the hybrid environments. So they have part of their class, some students at home, and then some students are in the actual classroom. And they're in this environment where they're trying to maintain, sustain their relationship with the students who are in attendance. At the same time, are trying to pay attention to those students who are at home, and they feel like they have to be in a fixed spot, and their gaze has to go here to the left, here to the right, and there's so much they have to be thinking about in terms of their positioning, in terms of eye contact, in terms of what are they presenting behind them or around them, but that can lead to a high degree of tension. So there's a lot of tension that's coming along with all of this, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. And in many ways, there was no prior training for trying to not only just navigate human connection through all of this, but now layer on like teaching and like child development right. as the kind of thing that's happening through that communication. It's incredibly challenging, and I think it's admirable the ways that I've at least gotten to observe teachers like rise up and really kind of figure out how do I serve the needs of students best, despite just being put in basically an impossible situation to be successful. Right. Here, let me share my screen.
Yeah, I'm going to stop the share. And so, right, you've got the controls.
Cool. So just to kind of like, further or kind of bookend like what I'm hoping to share here. So at the session, we'll look at these findings, which I just described to you, Tom, that came out, which I think are just, like I said, it's helpful for anyone and certainly for educators to be aware of, that these were things that were coming out of, new phenomenon-based research around folks who are engaging in a lot of video conferencing. I think it's important, given this like newness and something that we've all been subject to always try to be understanding that phenomenon better. And then we'll also talk about what the research group initially suggested as some immediately applicable ways to try to address those things. And you can see they kind of line up together. But when I first came across this, and how with how appreciative I was of just kind of the very accessible way that these things were presented, the thing that really caught me was that every single one of the suggestions in many ways was subtractive, right? So exit, like reduce the full screen size, hide your self view, reduce proximity to the screen. So one of the things about untethering, they suggested like, hey, get a wireless keyboard, and now maybe you feel a little less tethered, right? But I'm still seated. I just have a chair that's on wheels. But still, like, there's, like ways to just kind of like detach or turn off the camera. And then, I do have a great interest in visualization and using other forms of visualization as a way to kind of enhance communication, to demonstrate understanding, to just be understood better. So I started thinking about like how might, in addition to subtracting the things that the author and researcher suggested, how might you add a different visual layer so that instead of it just being subtractive, you're actually just kind of changing where that video attention is, and how might that now impact the audience. So for example, just as I'm doing right now, if we were thinking about the excessive eye contact, because I'm just sharing a whiteboard, and of course this could be any slides or anything like that, but right now for you, Tom, as my audience, that you've immediately got permission to look away from me and to look at what I'm sharing on the whiteboard, right? So I, as the presenter here, I'm dictating those conditions, but just by making that simple move of anything being available to present, that like I've immediately made it so that you do not have to be staring at me the whole time, because you can assume with intent, I'm trying to keep your attention, or the things that I want to draw your attention to are going to be somewhere on this whiteboard. And so like that becomes now I've added, instead of just saying, oh, make it less than full screen, let's now add a whiteboard. And maybe let's just to do another example, when we think about the mobility. So I was jokingly like showing this camera. And I don't know if you've tried any of these out, but like, whether it's the Facebook portal or Apple Center Stage, but any of these tracking cameras, like that to me, plus having I do not have a tracking camera on here, so you're only going to see my head get cut off when I stand up. But you can imagine if I had a better a camera that actually was designed to track with me, that I could still be in this video conference, but at the same time, be able to still adjust my visual presentation, not feeling at all tethered and not as clumsy as like an external keyboard, which you still have to set somewhere to operate, but just having this flexibility of like a tablet, an iPad, a Chrome tablet, anything like that. I think now instead of it just being, oh, I'm just trying to detach my kind of computer interface system, I'm actually able to add by like just having a tablet in my hand that I can use and feel a little less tethered. So I don't want to give away all of the things, but at the same time, I hope you get a sense of kind of the thought process here is to like look at the challenge, look at an initial suggested way to address it that's subtractive, and now let's try to think of a way that's additive. And this is kind of my grand sketch where I was trying to model like, here are all of the things that you could do at once, and there's no guarantees that all of a sudden you're going to reduce fatigue completely. But I do believe that having kind of a heightened awareness of causes and choice of solution, or choices of ways to address it that are within your control, might just empower people to say like, I'm going to give my self permission to turn my camera off, or I'm going to talk to my audience and say, hey, everybody, let's take 2 minutes of just doing camera off, and we'll just have this as a verbal dialogue for now, and that's okay.
All right, well, those are very thoughtful and useful strategies. And like you say, they're grounded in research, and you've been able to put them together in a way that teachers can adopt beneficially and help us as we have this sort of ongoing challenge of instructing in these virtual environments. So, Reshan, thank you so much. I'll just point out to everybody again that Dr. Richards will join us November the 1st at the Innovation Connection one-day event at Bentley University in Boston. And you can get more information and register at EdTechTeacher.org. And Reshan, it'll be great to see you again. You never age. I don't know what you're doing, but it's like I guess because you have so much energy. I don't know. So I just marvel at all the things that you do and do so wonderfully well. So thanks for being part of today, and of course being part of November the 1st. And I'll see you in a few weeks.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you so much.